Hi, welcome to Secrets of the Nakshatras, class number 8. I'm Barry Rosen. In my office, actually, I moved this weekend, so actually, no interruptions from the dogs this week. They're home. Anyway, good to see you all. Happy Mother's Day. I know there are a lot of people that may be at Mother's Day lunches and we may not see them today, but we'll just start on time and see who comes. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha. Vakritunda Mahakaya, Surya Koti Samapraha, Dirvigyam Kurame Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada. Jnanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvina Vatitamastu Mahavidvishayavahai, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Samaye Mangale Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukra Shani Vischa Rahuve Ketave Namaha. Honoring all the great gods, Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedavyasa, cognizer of the Vedas, and the holy tradition of masters, going back to my lineage through Brahmananda Saraswati. Honoring my Jyotish teachers, particularly Sanjay Roth, Camilla Sutton, and Bill Levacy, had the most impact on my teaching. Welcome Emma Goodman, who is in California. She usually watches the tapes. The nun, Sawari, is in California. And Jamie, I might be here. She doesn't. She's one of the moderators, so hopefully she's here. Sonara from Mumbai. Catherine France. It's John Miller in Texas. Ellen's usually watching the tapes. Mohini's here from Australia. Mentioned that he was going to be late. Claudia Ritchie's here. Beautiful picture. Audra, I haven't seen yet. Kathy, I think she told me she couldn't come today. Ushan in Asia. Afi's here. And me is usually watching the tapes. And Kata usually comes, we'll see. Bayama, he's in Korea, so I think he's always sleeping. Victoria, I think, said she couldn't come today. Trish, I think, could not come today. So that's our class. I want to remind you, those of you who are interested in my next class, understanding your hidden flaws and blind spots, the early registration is actually extended to May 14th, which is tomorrow, and the computer automatically kind of switches it. So I've been waiting to teach this course for about a year and a half, and I kept trying to get people kind of geared up for it, teaching a lot of different other material that was important for it. And it's one of my favorite things because I really think the most important thing that Jyotish can do is reveal the things that we can't see. It should show light on our patterns. And there's so many things in Vedic astrology that do this, and they're not always studied. So I have a kind of a we've got Dr. Rashi, we've got Boudica, we've got all kinds of these fascinating things that we're going to discuss, and just looking at the 12th house a lot, and the 8th house. So it's a totally fascinating course. So if you're interested in it, let me know. And if you want to get the early bird discount, you need some help or something. Sometimes I'll do payment plans with people. But I'm really excited about the class. I'm starting at the end of the Nakshatra class, so that's really great. So here, so I will be speaking at the United Astrology Conference in Chicago in 2 weeks, so there will be no class on Memorial Day weekend. I try not to schedule classes on holidays because everybody's traveling, and I'm usually traveling. Also, be visiting my dad, who also is in Chicago. So if you are in the Chicago area, it's a huge, huge conference, and there's a Vedic track, so kind of exciting. And I will be speaking in Sedona on November 30th also, so that's my conference schedule this year. I am doing, I have finalized the dates, but I haven't put out the website yet. I'm doing an experiential weekend with Vedic astrology in Boone, North Carolina at the Art of Living Ashram. I think the weekend October 5th and 6th or something like that. It's actually very ground earth-shattering activity. I'm trying to get Vedic astrology into our bodies. So I have a class on integrating it with Hatha Yoga, and I'm also going to be teaching some Ayurvedic astrology, and we're also just kind of trying to make it really practical because Vedic astrology can get very headsy. My goal is to kind of put it in the body. So I've got we're going to have a star watch and look at the Nakshatras in the sky. I'm just trying to make it totally experiential in this good, beautiful facility. And I'll be talking more about that as that gets developed. But it's not going to be that expensive. But it is going to be a 4-day weekend actually, starting probably going Friday night through Monday afternoon. If you are interested in a spiritual retreat. So my first venture, my friend Gary O'Toole is going to be coming from Ireland to co-teach with me. I've invited Andrew Foss to also come and do readings, because I'll be teaching with Gary. And so we're going to do a lot of life purpose soul searching too. So that's coming up. I don't even have a slide on it yet, but it did coming together for sure. First week of October. And those of you who like my classes, I've been teaching these boutique classes the last couple of years. They all are available online under the webinar tab. A class on transits, dashas, finding your soul's purpose, the schools of karma, the emotional and psychological basis of Vedic astrology. Good class to take if it's not a prerequisite. It's my most advanced basic course of Vedic astrology that leads into the psychological realm, and class on money karma. Secrets of the Houses course came out amazing. So all that stuff is available. That's my favorite thing. So let's go into today's material. I'm going to start with a new Nakshatra today because otherwise we're never going to get through all the 27. So we're going to at least do Mula today. There's like people. We've got 8 people here now, so we're slowly pulling in the Mother's Day luncheon group. But good to have everybody here. I'm going to start. This is a slideshow that I didn't send you yet because again I moved this weekend and I'm a little bit behind on getting my PowerPoints done to you, but I did. So I didn't get this one done to you, but I will send it after class. Ironically, because I was writing about Mula, I had done this whole slideshow presentation on the Shakti and the power of the Shakti, which I'd sent you the readings on, and it vanished. Mula Nariti took it away, and that's my wife needing me. Yes. I usually turn off Skype, and that doesn't happen. But so ironically, my presentation on Shakti disappeared, so we'll have to do it next week. But the basic thing with Shakti is I think it's really important to learn those keywords in Dennis Harness's article that I underlined for you in bold. And if you remember the key word like Ashwini, healing, and the power to bring healing to the planet, or Hasta, working with your hands and manifesting your desires. If you kind of remember these key phrases, Ashalesha, poisoning, Varani, transformation. If you remember the key word, which is kind of the Shakti, the power of that Nakshatra and that deity, then when you're doing your interpretations, you can really kind of pull those out of your head real quickly. So it's still good to kind of put those on flashcards and memorize them. So anyway, I'm not gonna, I can't talk about Shakti because it was taken away from me, but we will talk about Mula. So Mula is starting the group of Sattvic Nakshatras. So all the Sattvic Nakshatras go from Sagittarius to Pisces. And Sattvic means that they're pure and they're connected with spirituality. But the other side of spirituality is that it's connected to moksha. So sometimes the Sattvic constellations are very difficult because they're taking away the material that we kind of built up in Maga through Jestha, and they're kind of bringing us to the spirituality, and sometimes that makes more difficult life lessons. Mula is, I've spent a lot of time with Mula, and I've really gotten to kind of know Mula well because I have Rahu in Mula, and I'm in a Rahu period. So Mula is the governing influence on my dasha period, and I've just really had to come to understand it well in order to kind of get through this period. So I'll share with you my insights on Mula. I don't know why. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the controls today. I'm trying to kind of get rid of another slide, and it's not happening. Okay. So Mula again is at the beginning of Sagittarius. So we learned last week about the Gandanta, and in the Gandanta, we went from the end of Jestha, which is one of the most difficult places in the sky, which is a very emotional churning place, where the material kind of starts getting pulled away, and then we go into Jestha, into Mula. The first pot of Mula is also very kind of problematic because we're not quite sure what's happening, because we're moving from kind of the material realm of Jestha into the spiritual realm of Sagittarius and Mula, and there's this kind of big energy kind of shift that leaves us kind of a little bit diluted. The Mula means root. Easy one to remember. You can think of roots as in gardening roots, and Mula people like to do herbal gardening. The whole essence of Mula is getting to the root of all the problems and blessings in the physical and material world. So when you're advising people that have issues around Mula Nakshatra, you have to use the word root, getting to the root of their problems, because they have to dig deep to find and transform their problems. What happens when we go from Jestha to Mula is there's this dissatisfaction with the material world, and the whole purpose is that we need to kind of start moving toward the spiritual realm, toward the heavens. And if people don't have any spiritual energy or life, and suddenly the material world is yanked away, which is what happens in Mula, you have to really get them onto a spiritual path, or encourage them to take up meditation or go to the temple or do something, because Mula is ruled by Ketu, and it requires spiritual energy. In a sense, the symbolism here, we need to prune away the kind of the old, in order for the spiritual tree to grow. So in a sense, we're burning the roots of karma in order to find self-realization. So it's a very important nakshatra for moving from the material world, the tamasic nakshatras, into the spiritual world. The interesting thing, for those of you who know a lot of Western astrology, the galactic center is here. So GC, which is very important in Western astrology, is in Mula, and Westerners say it's at 20, maybe 26 degrees or something. In Vedic astrology, the galactic center is at 3 degrees, and it's a very kind of intense point of the cosmos. I've written about it a number of times. It actually creates people who are kind of whistleblowers for the truth. Again, Sagittarius really kind of wants to get the truth out. It's really into, ninth house activity, right action, and somehow in the galactic center. It creates people who are kind of whistleblowers. It was kind of interesting. Somebody did a study of it. I thought it was really fascinating. Mula people need to be practical and build strong foundations in their lives and move toward higher aspirations. I'm putting out the keys first. So whenever you're advising people with key issues in Mula Nakshatra, you have to, they have to kind of integrate their material and their spiritual worlds in order to be successful, because K2 wants to run off to the forest and meditate and find a guru, and in a sense, we can't always do that. We have to kind of learn to live in the world, and we have to have our if you take my financial classes, if you don't have a strong root or a base to your pyramid, if your root chakra isn't grounded to the planet, you have no money to pursue your spiritual energy. So you always have to grow your roots deep into the soil, into the material realm, in order to kind of let the spiritual prosper. It's just the basic energy of the tree. But at the same time, there's this need to sacrifice our human desires to move on the path of divine. So again, as I mentioned before, if you meet people who are having mula issues, then others are in a K2 period, or they're in a period where the Lord is in Mula Nakshatra, things are suddenly being pulled away from them: relationships, money, their houses, and if they're not on a spiritual path, they're really kind of a mess, and they're really looking for answers, and you have to help them. And I think I told you my story. When I started my Rahu period, which was in Mula Nakshatra, it was like the housing, the mortgage crisis hit. I lost my house. I moved from Sedona. I kind of started moving out of my material financial world into teaching more spirituality and more astrology. And so, Mula kind of kicked me in the butt too there. And it's painful when it happens, but, it was a good thing. And actually, I have a better life because I followed it. So you have to it kind of does that. Again, Mula is ruled by K2, so it's a combination of Jupiter and K2. It's similar to a Jupiter K2 conjunction. I have a Jupiter K2 conjunction in my chart in the 8th house, which is, also creates devotion to the guru. K2, Mula is the strongest of the 3 K2 nakshatras because it's in the sattvic realm of Sagittarius, and K2 itself is, one of the best places for K2 to be a Sagittarius, next to Scorpio. Probably made the best place for K2 to be a Sagittarius, actually. Pisces, K2, Pisces, Sagittarius, and Scorpio are certainly the 3 best spots for K2, and then Leo. So the issue sometimes is the soul gets aroused to move towards self-realization here, and there has to be that movement. And sometimes, we've got Saturn going retrograde into Mula on June 6th until November. And if you remember last year, much of last year was Saturn in Mula, and it was really kind of a difficult year because Saturn, kind of takes things away anyway, and you put it in K2's Nakshatra, connected to the goddess Nritti and to Mula, and it's kind of like pulling stuff out of us to kind of get us onto the spiritual path. And so, again, Mula does well if we get onto the spiritual path as such. K2 has this kind of destructive nature to it. I always look at K2 benevolently because I've got a conjunct Jupiter, but K2 can be pretty horrible if it's in the wrong nakshatras, conjunct the wrong malefics, and things like that. Jupiter K2 combination in its negative form creates religious fundamentalism. I mean, one of the problems with Sagittarius is fanaticism, and we certainly have a problem all over the world with fanaticism. My religion is better than yours, and kind of Mula Nakshatra kind of really fans that energy. So you see somebody's ascendant lord here, somebody's moon here, somebody's dasha lord here. They may be entering if it's afflicted, they may entering a period of religious fundamentalism. which is a problem. Sun, Mars, and Jupiter do the best in this nakshatra. We'll get through the planets there. So favorable, unfavorable traits of this nakshatra. So again, if Ketu is strong in the 3rd, 6th, or the 11th houses, those are the 3 places you want Ketu. You want Ketu connected to good signs like Sagittarius, Scorpio, Pisces, or Leo. Then we'd say Ketu is strong, and the good qualities will come out. Skills in manipulation. In other words, you get preachers coming out of this nakshatra because they're good at kind of manipulating people into converting them. Can create good politicians. I'm not sure there are good politicians, but I guess there's some that exist. Tactful people, clever people. There can actually be material success if Ketu is strong in this chart. Again, if you've studied with me, Ketu can be this funny planet where if it's connected to certain planets and signs, it can actually bring a lot of material success, but you're not interested in it. I think I've told the story for those of you who have taken my classes where I was running a Saturn Ketu period, and you would if anybody was looking at that and knew any Vedic astrology, you would think, oh, a really difficult period. Well, it was a difficult period, but because my Ketu is conjunct Jupiter in the 8th, I won this first prize in the Citibank contest, and I won $25,000, which I then needed badly because K2 then started taking all these things away. But K2 can bring money, and the funny thing is that sometimes you can be disinterested in it because it's K2. You're not interested in money. The unfavorable Mula, K2 is again worse in the 4th house, as we know. It's really the worst place you want it in the chart. You don't really want it in the Kendras. You don't want it in Taurus, Libra, Gemini, or Virgo because those are 2 material, intellectual signs, and K2's headless and stuff like that. So unfavorable K2 placement tells people, you tell people what they want to hear. You become a pleaser. Lack of appreciation for others, arrogant, self-destructive. Marriage and affairs that do not work. So K2 again can create all kinds of problems. Mula's personality is very investigating. It makes people good detectives. It makes people good researchers. So those are the types of things that you want to encourage people to do if K2 is prominent in some nakshatra. That's important. They want to get to the root of the truth. Again, the root is that key word. There's comfort with the dark, the unseen, the hidden. Again, the root. We're looking for the roots. It's great for researchers. Again, like I said, people get very interested in herbalism and gardening in this nakshatra. Something that I never think about with Sagittarius, but very, very true. It used to be connected to witchcraft, and that's if you're a witch, you dug up all the herbs to create your incantations. But in today's world, there are a lot of people into herbs. Makes people ambitious, persistent, inquisitive. The big thing about Mula personalities is that people get these strong reversals of fortune. It gives and it takes away. I mean, you can, it's that Rahu Ketu syndrome. It kind of elevates you to the moon, and then it kind of pulls you down. So you're reminded that to go to the divine. So the big key to remember with this energy is reversals of fortune. People can be prone to arrogance and ego and anger if it's afflicted. People can be exhaustive in relationships, leading to exhaustive discussions about talking about the relationship. Again, it's prone to deep suffering, ups and downs. Careers, again, it supports careers in science and medicine, good detectives and lawyers. Astrology can also be powerful here. K2 is always astrology, and Jupiter is always the guru, so that's a good combination. Mula personality, seeking in the darkness and finding your way through the darkest confusion. It forces us to go beyond the physical when adverse situations and physical challenges come up. So with Mula, if you're advising somebody and they've just lost their marriage and their house and their business partner just took all their money or something like that, and it's, you can see how it's connected to Mula. It's happening because nature is trying to point them toward something spirituality, and you've got to help them, otherwise they're just going to be victimized. Sometimes mula can lead towards depression. Ketu, can easily lead to depression when it's afflicted. Expansive emotion, sometimes if it's connected to Jupiter or Venus, passionate pursuits. But the big key with mula is that we want to dissolve old structures so that we can create new ones. Planets in mula, the lagna, the rising sign, spiritual warriors interested in gaining knowledge, but can be self-destructive by nature. Sun does well here, but sometimes karmic issues with bosses or fathers. They have to avoid being dogmatic. Anything in Sagittarius has to be avoid fundamentalism and dogmatism, because it tends to get on this religious soap opera, and people are going to run away. Moon, lack of emotional support from mother. So Moon does not do well in mula. Inability to connect emotionally with others. Again, Ketu Moon is just not a good connection. Mars here is strong, but Ketu can create self-doubt, indecisiveness, fighting with siblings. Mercury, I didn't write down for some reason on the next slide. Mercury embrace spiritual but has to reject the old, lack of support. So Mercury doesn't do well in Sagittarius. It doesn't do well in mula. Jupiter is strong here in its own sign. They have guru issues from past lives or problems with husbands or children. Some subtle influence may be there, but again, it's not bad. Venus, painful relationship issues may need to be destroyed if you get Venus in mula. Saturn, the planet of karma, will not people escape their past. So Saturn, last year we went through we had Saturn with mula in transit. Some people have it in their natal charts, but it's pretty devastating. And now we've got retrograde Saturn going into mula on June 6th until November. So you'll find a lot of people will be kind of like pulling at their hair. I mean, if you've done any bad karma, then you kind of, Saturn will make sure that justice is done. So you've got to kind of, there are remedies for all of this. It's not something to worry about it, but if you have Saturn and mula in your natal chart, or if you have Saturn, you have to kind of be on top of this one. Rahu and mula, looking for happiness in the wrong places. I've got Rahu and mula. I suppose I look for happiness in the wrong places. Ketu, stuck in the past. Ketu may be too strong in its own nakshatra, because in a sense you want it there, but it's still kind of like stuck in the past. But if you see a signature where Ketu is in mula, it means they have a strong spiritual signature in this life. Purusharthas, funny one. This one I can never remember, because this is how I remember it. It's a Kama Purushartha. Kama, we always think of Kama Sutras and love, but Kama is also passion, and it's kind of sometimes sensual passion and love of pleasure. So it's very funny that mula has a kind of a passionate nature in that respect, but I really think it's kind of the religious passion also in Sagittarius. It's kind of that fundamentalism that comes with Sagittarius that we have to stay in touch with. The caste nature is the butcher caste. In this case, we call it the evil priest. I mentioned the butcher caste is certainly connected to kind of ancient days when animal sacrifices were done, or butcher caste is more of a kind of a priestly class on some level, but it was also kind of a dark, it can be like the dark priest also, but it becomes symbolic of cutting the cord between the physical and the astral bodies. So I mean, the key word with mula nakshatra is always liberating and regenerative. Greek mythology, it's connected to Hecate, the goddess of magic and the night, and this goddess endeavors to bring light to the darkness to effect change. Because it has the same roots in, with Hindu mythology. Nritti is always about. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's about bringing light. But Hecate was one of the gods that guided Persephone through the darkness on her trip to the underworld. So again, it's getting into the roots, getting into the subconscious in order to kind of transform those deep patterns in order to change your life. So the mythology is definitely telling us to go deep inside through meditation and psychology to kind of transform our lives. Hindu mythology is connected to the 10 divine mothers, and for Mother's Day we had to kind of do that. I don't have time to go over the divine mothers, but there's all these mother goddesses. Basically, it's connected to the mother goddesses. So happy Mother's Day with Nriti. Devata is Nriti. She's the goddess of death and destruction. And again, whenever you use those words with people, you're going to scare them. So you always have to use instead of using the word death, use the word transformation, because yes, in some, if a person's meant to die, you could have something tragic happen, but for the most part, destruction and death are about transformation, going into the underworld like Pluto to transform our subconscious. Mula people can be self-destructive and spoil things for themselves, so you have to warn, people if they don't, that's kind of their blind spot of mulas. They can't see that they're kind of like self-destructive. And I have to admit, I've been a little self-destructive too. It's an unconscious pattern, and you make bad mistakes because you don't see it. Nriti is connected to Kali, and Kali is kind of the fierce mother who will kill to protect her children. It's like if you go after a bear and she's got her cubs with you, I mean, that bear is going to really destroy you. That's really kind of the Kali energy. Really kind of, she's got that fierce motherly love to kind of protect her children. But on the deepest level, Kali grants eternal life. When you really study the mythology of Kali, it's all about sacrificing our human desires to move to the path of the divine. So it really has to, again, the whole key with this nakshatra is to transform and find spirituality and sacrifice our desires for money and lust and things like that. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. Remedies, again, I've talked about that. Spiritual initiation, if a person's not on the path, transformational work needs to be done. Worship of Kali and Rudra, the root mantras, wearing gold and black. In general, when you do the root mantras for the nakshatras, you do them when the moon is going through that nakshatra, so the moon and Mula, and you do it at the time of the lunar month when Mula is operating, and that's the second half of Jeshta, Mother Jeshta. Sometime we'll have to teach the Hindu calendar, but there's all these kind of months, and you kind of have to know it at some point. Famous people or infamous people with this nakshatra, Adolf Hitler has his Jupiter and Ketu in Mula. He doesn't have any Saturn aspects. So again, here's a case where his really dark energies came out here. He's a Libra rising. Jupiter is a functional malefic here. But he really kind of, again, he was kind of a fanatical person, obviously. And he was kind of like a preacher on a political level who just, here's where the dark energy really came out because Jupiter is a functional malefic. Okay, so raise your hand if you have Mula in your chart, or if there's some prominent planet here, and I will maybe we'll just look at it more closely and see what we see. Okay, Kathy Coleman has, I think I've got the right chart now. No, is that Kathy? We got the right chart up, right? I put Kathy Coleman too, so we wouldn't give you Lee's chart. Okay, you've got Mars in
it's not the right chart. This one isn't the right chart.
I can't believe, why does it always do this to me? This is
1954. It's supposed to be 1952.
Why did okay, I got it. I'm sorry.
That one's right. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you have Moon in Mula, and it's exalted in the Devamsha, so it's in the good Pada. So usually Moon in Mula is a little bit insecure. but it's exalted in the Navamsha chart, so that's supporting it. It's in the right pada. We have to start moving into padas, and certainly putting it exalted in the pada is good. Do you do some nurturing role career-wise with Moon in the 10th here?
Yes, I have. I've done many things. I've been a dean of students. I've done lots of work in human resources, and I've kind of taken a. People have often referred to me as kind of the mother of the whatever place I've been in. So.
Okay, and how do you think this? I mean, having the moon in this nakshatra is very potent. How have all these qualities kind of manifested in your life?
Well, when I was ready to go to graduate school, I was searching for a graduate school where I could study psychology, but from a spiritual perspective, because I had a very spiritual, astrological, big worldview. And so I found the California Institute of Integral Studies here in San Francisco. And so it's a institution started by an Indian man to study cross-traditional, cross-religious discipline. So I studied psychology from a spiritual, multidisciplinary, multi-religious perspective. And then I also worked at that institution for 20 years.
Okay, wow.
So that really expressed the Mula Moon. Then I was president of Kepler College. So there's another leadership, in the spiritual astrological realm. And then I worked for the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which is, also another one. So I've really expressed this. I've only really had careers. I mean, I had one little short thing that wasn't very spiritual, and which didn't make me very happy. So.
Okay, so it's really great that you discovered the root of Mula in your life. Otherwise, you might have really suffered. So have you had the dramatic reversals that Mula can bring, or and it might come up in a moon period or in a sun period, because which you may not have gone through, or it would have been really early.
Let's see, dramatic reversals. Like when you talked about the big financial reversals, not.
Okay, so you're
not really, but I've always been. There have been certain. What has happened is there's been quite a bit of change, and then because I have the astrological perspective, I'm always okay, that's the message. It's time to let this go and move on to whatever else is next. So maybe that expresses it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you went through your sun period pretty early, and then your moon period ended in 1993 when you were 40. So it sounds like you managed it pretty well. That's great, and I think it's being exalted in the Navamsha chart helps.
Yeah, and I have a very spiritual husband that I've now been married to for 30 years, who's very into. I met him through the school, and he's a writer, author, works with all kinds of spirituality and esoteric subjects and astrology. So,
okay, fascinating, Kathy. Thank you for sharing it. I think we have a lot more to talk about sometime. Okay, anybody else with Mula besides me? And I went through mine already.
Don't think so, Barry. I don't see any other hands raised.
There might be people that and again, we're going to have to. Okay, so any questions about Mula? I think we can move on. I think it's a fascinating nakshatra. I mean, I personally have been glued to it, since I started really trying to understand this Rahu period that I'm in. So again, remember, in a couple of weeks we'll study the connection between the dasha period running and the nakshatra that's running. And again, the nakshatra ruler is the dominant energy of the period. So you have to really kind of look at that, and then you have to kind of really, it suddenly starts revealing a lot of hidden things.
Barry, I just want to say that this is Kathy. I've always found, even though I have a Mula moon, I've always found it really hard to understand. And every time I've read anything about it, I just go, what? I just don't get this. I don't get how it really applies to me. I mean, the examples I just gave you were good examples, but I don't feel like that, like most things I've read about it really do it justice.
Well, it's true. I mean, your moon is very strong because it's Lord of the 5th and the 10th. So, it's a very powerful placement for career. You said you had a very powerful, spiritual career. I think it's just so strong now. And K2 is in Cancer. So it's kind of a subtle, K2 is in Auslasia with Mercury. It is in the 5th. I have to think about what that is doing here. So, the 5th house is always kind of, spirituality anyway. And, I mean, you probably, did you have children with your husband?
Yes. I have 2 children with 2 different husbands. Yeah.
Okay. Is K2 is in the Gandanta just barely, just kind of a really kind of a difficult area. Maybe that's why it's kind of so hidden. Have your children? Is your relationship with your children challenging, or?
With one of them, it is, but also I did have a lot of trouble having children, so I think that's how that K2 there expresses, and kind of when I had a very spiritual attitude about it, so that helped. And finally it worked out, and then I had really normal births and healthy children, but 2 miscarriages before, and each, and my daughter's pretty challenging for me and strong personality, and she has Sun Mars K2 in the 5th herself, so.
Okay. K2 in the 5th is one that doesn't always come to mind when I think about it, but usually it creates kind of some challenge with children, but it can support spirituality deeply, and so I think kind of interesting. I have to see what's going on in the Navamsha chart again. K2's in the 1st in the Navamsha chart. Mercury's in the 12th. To really kind of think about that. I mean, K2 in the 1st in the Navamsha chart, gives you past life experience, means you were incarnated with strong spiritual, background, in this lifetime, and even maybe a strong astrological background. So that was kind of a gift that you brought in. So that's easy to remember. And it's in Pisces, so it has a lot of dignity there. So, I mean, that K2 is very strong. So I think that's why the moon's very strong. Do you see that now?
Yeah.
So it's just, I think you should just assume that, that K2 Nakshatra, that Mula is very strong, and that the moon there is really blessed. And it's Lord of the 5th and the 10th. And it's really not, it's hemmed in by Mars and Rahu, which is a little problematic, but, I don't know if you felt, you just had a lot of battles at work that have kind of challenged you and kind of hemmed you in emotionally around work. How's that manifested?
I would say that actually that I've always had a lot of strong men in my work life to deal with. So not really all bad, but I have to be a really strong person. Like I can't be weak. I have to, I kind of have to match them. And also I've had a really strong brother. I've just had strong men in my life that it's been good basically overall. I mean, a couple of challenges, but
you've got that great yoga, Mars and Scorpio and the 9th. I mean, that's just really powerful.
I've always felt like if I was wimpy, I would have just been walked all over. So I really have to sort of be my fullest self and my fullest Mars on to deal with all the strong people in my life.
Yeah, you have a very powerful chart. There's always something that we're working on. Okay, so let's move on to the second part of the talk. Thank you, Kathy. I didn't.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's move on to. I'm going to move on to the Purusharta section, which I sent you. That's. Now, if that one's missing too, we're going to be in trouble. But I sent it to you, so I think I can find a copy in my email. Okay, so one of the things that I've been wanting to move at, we're going to have to continue this part later next week too, is, padas is just so core to understanding the nakshatras, the four padas in each nakshatra. And we need to spend a whole lesson on that. There's so many things that we can do with it. We're kind of going to introduce it this week a little bit, and then we have to go really deep with it next week. And I'll give you some homework to work on it, because my whole thing is about getting microscopic. I mean, if you tell, if somebody has Mars in Aries and you say they're competition and they're in the Cancer pada, in Ketu's nakshatra, you're going to be wrong, So, you have to remember, we always have to get into the microscopics of the padas, and each of the padas then relates to the four aims of life. So that's what we're going to cover a little bit today. But I also want to practice a little bit more with some basic things. I will get to the Sattva. I'm doing the Sarvabhadra chakra is kind of like a black hole. I think if we spent, like I said, I'm planning on next year spending 5 weeks on it. I think we could do it justice in 5 weeks. I think it's a little overwhelming when I kind of go over it quickly, and I need your feedback on that. And I think it's so important for like seeing a visual of what's going on, and I want you to at least understand it like it's like, first grade for how to read a chart. But interpreting it is going to take about 5 weeks to learn. And so, but I just want you to at least start looking at it over the next year so that you can see all these cool things. But we'll do that last in the course, because it could easily eat up an hour and a half of time, and then I'm not continuing on with our schedule. This thing is. I'm in trouble with this. Okay. So, yeah, my whole point, in teaching Vedic astrology is that I always think it's like reading strands of DNA, and so we have to keep learning finer and finer aspects of a chart reading. At the beginning we have to learn, house and sign, and now we're learning Nakshatra, and then we move to pada, and then a Vamsa chart, and then eventually, I'll teach 3 or 4 classes on the D60, because you can really get very microscopic there. But as we go deeper in Vedic astrology, we get to really see, the difference between people. I mean, 2 twins, if you know twins, they're alike, but they have very different things. Their D60 charts, are separated. And so that's why there's all this kind of microscopic information in people's charts. And so you have to kind of learn how to read it. And each part gives a meaning. We don't want to ever be caught up in superficial readings. I had an astrologer once that used to say, "Oh, that's good." Well, or "That's bad." Well, what does that really mean? We don't ever want to do that. We want to get into very specific information. Real quickly, and we talked about this already. We're starting to move into the Sattvic constellations, again connected to purity, truth, reality. A Sattvic person believes in purity of being, thought, and actions. Happy people aspiring towards the higher self. So the Sattvic constellations that we're starting to move through are they're very positive, but on the other hand, they can be the most challenging, because they're often connected to kind of taking things away so that we move toward God. So it's very, very spiritual, but spiritual is often challenging, as many of you know. I have this kind of working theory, and you might want to look at your charts, and this is something that no one's taught me, is that, the nakshatra that you're born with is going to start your dasha cycles. We'll learn this in a couple of weeks. So I was born in Jyeshtha Nakshatra, which is the end of the material realm, and so all the dasha periods that I've moved through have been, sattvic nakshatras, and I've had a very spiritual life. It's kind of curious. You might look at your charts and see what nakshatra you were born into, and whether you were born into a tamasic or a rajasic realm. And there's no judgment about either of them. It's just a theory I'm kind of working with, where if you have, I mean, it's very clear. I mean, if you were born in the spring, you're going to have a lot of planets in the rajasic constellations, and now we're moving into the spring, and suddenly there's all this activity to move forward. So everything's, Mercury got out of Revati now, and so everything's in the rajasic nakshatras, except for Saturn, and Jupiter's in tamasic nakshatras. So there's this kind of movement, to be active and to do things, and then in the tamasic nakshatras, which were about material manifestation, and you meet people that their lives are just about their new house and their new car, and how much money is in their bank. There's nothing wrong with that, and then suddenly that gets pulled away, and they search deeply more spiritually. And maybe it takes lifetimes for that to happen, but people on a spiritual path, or people who come to astrology, they're often dealing with the sattvic nakshatras. So I'd be curious to see how that's working in your charts. We'll play with that in a couple of weeks. I was looking, and I'll do this next week, in a couple of weeks too. I went through my own nakshatras. I think the nakshatra that we're born with is followed by the nakshatra after it. This is what we'll learn in a couple of weeks with the dashas. So if you're born in Jyeshtha, then your Ketu period following your Mercury period is Mula. It's not Ashwini. It's not Magha. And then your Purvashada period, your Venus period is Purvashada. So it's very interesting. You can start really understanding your periods better when you understand the nakshatra qualities. So we'll learn that in a couple of weeks. It's kind of a sneak preview. I want to practice. I think we kind of we did a little bit of this week, but this is kind of core integration, because now that you're starting to know nakshatras, we need to play with your charts a little bit more. We have to connect karakas to nakshatras, and we have to connect house ownerships to nakshatras. So the big mystery with nakshatras, well, how do you use them? The nakshatra is the mental energy, and the material energy is going to be more connected to the planet and the houses involved. And then there's these kind of hidden relationships that start happening. I showed you last week in my chart, for those of you who watched last week's lesson. So let me pull up my chart again. I'll explain this again, because I want you to kind of, and we need to practice with your charts a little bit, because this is like core level. What can we do with this stuff? We have to, how can we use this on a practical level to help people? Okay, so this is very revealing. So here's my chart, Scorpio rising. I've got Venus in Shravana Nakshatra, which is owned by the moon. And the moon, and Venus is in the third house. And my moon is in Scorpio, hemmed in by Rahu and Saturn. And my moon's almost in the Gandanta. It's not real happy. It's not a real happy moon. I've had a kind of a difficult emotional life, especially when I was younger. And one of the ways that I dealt with, so Venus, one of the things one of the things about the third house is it's connected to kind of primal, instinctual energies, subconscious energies. So put Mars here, you get people who are very aggressive. Put Venus here, you get people who are very kind of sexual. So I had a lot of sexual energy in my Venus period, and I didn't quite know what to do with it. And I kind of overused it because I was reacting to my debilitated moon, because Venus, when it's in the moon's nakshatra, when I felt emotionally fearful, which was most of my life in graduate school, it was not a very good period. I ended up being very sexual to kind of like drown out the emotion. So here Venus in the third house connected to the moon's nakshatra in the first is creating this kind of mental energy to the moon, and it's kind of creating kind of a difficulty situation. And I also shared with you last week that my Mercury is in Mars's nakshatra, and Mars is in the sixth. So there's becomes a connection between Karaka values for Mercury in the sixth house, and also just there's a natural connection between the fourth and the sixth houses, because in a sense Mercury is in the fourth house. There's a couple of problems here. The sign dispositor for Mercury is Saturn. It's in the 12th house, so that creates problems with landlords and homelessness and tenants and problems around the home and loss of home, which I've had a lot of. And you can just see that Mercury in Mars's nakshatra creates disputes around housing. And here I have Mercury going into Mercury's, my sixth house. And my landlord the other day, as I'm moving out of my old house, is trying to hit me with this loss of damage deposit on something that I didn't do. And, and I had to have this big fight with her and kind of exercise my energy. Now, I think I'll win because of Mars and Aries. I'm always victorious in these battles with landlords and mortgage companies and problems with tenants and things like that. But just have a lot of it because it's a natural connection between the fourth Mercury in Mars' nakshatra, and Mars is in the sixth house. So connects Mars and Mercury disputes. So the principle that I'm trying to point out here is that you should be able to look at any of your planets and see additional connections that you weren't just seeing. In basic astrology, you learn Lord of the fourth and the 12th. Okay. And, yes, there's some of that also, but there's some deeper connections here, that you can see by seeing what planet each nakshatra is and where the dispositor. Now, this is basic stuff. I covered it in the intro lesson, but we really need to kind of practice it more and see that you got it down. Do you have any questions about this basic principle? Last week we learned the daisy wheel. You can connect all the planets, around to themselves. Did anybody want to share what they found in their daisy wheel? Did anybody have a chance? Audrey, why don't you share?
I did mine, Barry, but
what?
Okay.
Let me bring
I did mine.
Okay, let's bring up your chart. Okay. Okay, here's Audra's chart. Aries rising, Mars in the first. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, Barry, I did mine, but I thought it was a little bit confusing. I kind of want to make sure I did it correctly. Like, we start with a nakshatra, and we're looking for the ruler of the nakshatra and following it, or are we following the ruler of the house that the nakshatra's in?
It's both. Okay, so in your case, so start with the moon, because we always start with the moon with nakshatras. So the moon is in Venus's nakshatra. Venus is in Venus is in the 11th house in Syatmakaraka, and it's in Jupiter's nakshatra, Purva Bhadrapada. Jupiter is in Ketu's nakshatra, which is Magha, in your 5th house. Ketu is in the 6th house in Chitra nakshatra, connected to Mars, and then so that brings it back to the 1st house again, where Mars is in Ketu's nakshatra. So then we kind of end our loop here in the Mars Ketu loop. So that's what I meant for you to do last week. What you can start doing is you can start saying, okay, there's a nice connection between the moon, the 4th house, and the 11th house and the Atmakaraka. So there's a connection between 4 and 11 here, which means gains through property and maybe real estate. Whenever you get Moon and Venus connected in Gemini astrology, it's a very good kind of financial situation. It would come out it could come out in a Venus period specifically because Moon's in Venus's period, but it usually there's a connection between 1 and 4 and 11 here through the Nakshatras. That's just basic stuff. But what in terms of your daisy reel, did you come to any realization about? I mean, we end up with Mars K2 in your daisy wheel. What does that reveal about yourself?
You know, it's just like when I did the moon. See, I landed back at Anuradha. Obviously, I messed up somewhere, but one thing I found is, boy, there's a lot of stuff that rolls back to Mercury and Venus, and the whole Mars thing with Aries and its 8 places over to Scorpio and Jesta and Anuradha. It just seems like I've got a lot of stuff that bounce off of or end up going through Mercury, and a lot of stuff connected to Scorpio.
Okay.
I had a hard time though too trying to figure out how to interpret.
Yeah.
I mean, just like what you did, you took, correct me if I'm wrong here, with the moon being ruled by Venus, you followed the ruler of the Nakshatra to the 11th, and
Right.
then you followed the ruler of the Nakshatra in the 11th to the ruler of the Nakshatra in the 5th. So every time you're moving to the ruler of whatever Nakshatra you have come to.
Right. So
Right?
basically, yeah, it's this whole principle of dispositors, which we learn in Vedic astrology. If the dispositor is poorly placed, somebody somebody has an exalted Jupiter and it's in oscillation nakshatra, and Jupiter and Mercury's in the 12th house. And so somebody says, oh, you have an exalted Jupiter, how wonderful. But no, Jupiter's in the 12th and it's connected to oscillation, and Mercury's kind of it's connected to the 12th house. So the dispositor has such an important impact on the planet. And my basic astrology classes, I always teach landlords and tenants. If you've got your body and your intelligence are very strong because you've got Mars in Aries, and so when it's you're always home, and that always kind of is very kind of a very powerful place because the landlord is in his own house, he takes care of the property. If Mars goes into the 8th house, which would be his own sign, that would be okay. Let's say Mars goes into the 12th house into Pisces. He's in prison. He can't take care of his property. So the whole thing with the dispositors of the nakshatras is the same thing. What's going on with the nakshatra dispositors? Are they happy? Are they in a good place? So your moon is connected to the 11th house and to Venus and Mercury, which are not great planets for Aries. They're the more challenging planets for Aries, and that creates but at the same time, there's a positive connection between the 4th and the 11th happening. I may not have done a really good job explaining this. Did you understand it?
That's kind of what I was going to ask next, Barry. We just did Venus to the 11th and then to K2 and yada yada. So yeah, can you walk through what we just did and interpret that for me so I can understand how to interpret it?
Yeah. So I'll do my best. I don't know you as well as you know yourself, which is why I kind of wanted you to kind of do this exercise, because I can see it in my chart because I know myself so well. I can't, to read deeply into somebody else's chart is a little tricky, and I don't. But let me see what I can do with it.
And I guess for me, Barry, I'm looking for an example here. Just walk me through what you're looking at so I can learn how to do it.
Right. Yeah, I did it with my chart, but because let me do it with my chart again because maybe I would do. Let me also see.
Come on, I won't learn.
What?
then I won't learn, Barry. Just
Okay.
go from, you're taking Venus to the 11th house, and Mercury and Venus are in the 11th house. So you're still viewing this as the moon's relationship with Venus and Mercury, right? Which is challenging.
Okay. Well, what I guess what I'm saying here is that the moon gets connected to Venus, which is, and Venus is the Atmakorica. So basically
That's good.
it creates this, Venus Atmakorica is always, life lesson is always learning about relationships. And so there's this emotional upheaval because the moon is in Venus's Nakshatra connected to the Atmakorica, even though there are eventual gains in relationship because Lord of the second and the 11th, Lord of the seventh and the 11th, there's a lot of emotional turmoil, you know by nature, because the Atmakarka creates turmoil to kind of make us grow. Now Mercury, which is the most difficult planet for Aries, is Lord of the sixth and the third, which means that anytime you get the sixth house connected to the seventh lord, you're going to get challenges with relationship. Partners become enemies. Relationships cause sickness. So in a sense, emotional breakups become extremely challenging for you because of Venus. The moon's connected to Venus, and Venus is connected to Mercury, the Lord of the sixth. Okay, then Venus is in the fifth house, connected to Jupiter. So um, there can be all this expansive, and Jupiter is also your Dara Karaka, which is the significator for husband, and Jupiter is the Karaka for husband also. So there's always this kind of optimistic, expansionary energy about relationships and romance because of the connection of Venus. Well, there's a Venus, the fifth and the 11th house are aspect to each other anyway, but there's a deeper mental energy connected to kind of expansiveness in relationship. But in a sense, it becomes, Jupiter is in Ketu's Nakshatra. So if you meet spiritual men, and eventually maybe you will find a spiritual husband, I think it will work. And because Maga is kind of a kingly nakshatra. I mean, if you get these men who have these huge egos like Donald Trump or something, I mean, I'm not judging him one way or the other, but Maga, Maga just, if Ketu is not in good shape, Ketu is in Virgo, where it's one of the places it's not happy. It does well in the sixth house, but it still kind of creates all this kind of upheaval in order to kind of create there's all this drama, emotional drama around relationships. There's a lot of hope that it will be better, but there's continued disruption, in the process. And I think we decided that maybe your Jupiter period would finally land you a husband. But and that's what I kind of I also like the fact that in your relationship shop, Jupiter's in the 11th in a friend sign. Okay, so that's this. Did I make it a little bit clearer? And is it right?
Yeah, I do. In relationships, I always end up feeling like I'm in the enemy's camp, and a lot of times there is a triangle. But yeah, really what I was looking for, a great job, really appreciate it. The main thing I was looking for in what you just did, Barry, is in order to do the daisy wheel, I kind of have to know what to follow in order to read the story.
Okay.
So yes, big help in helping me to understand. You have to follow a certain line, loop, whatever, and that was really what I was needing help with. So yes, I
Okay.
so appreciate what you
Okay,
did.
we got it. And this is a very advanced technique, and so if you're not getting it, then it's okay. I kind of threw it out quickly. I wanted to go over it again this week. And Venkata had a question. I don't know if we should do his chart. We haven't done his chart the whole class. How do we use the daisy wheel in prediction? Okay. Well, let's look at your chart. You know, one of the things that you'll learn about me, Venkat, is that I don't totally shy away from prediction, because I kind of, you know, if you read my books and things like that, it, you know, I think astrology is always about revealing the kind of the psychological puppet strings that kind of run our minds, and how we can kind of that fool us, and that we have to kind of shine some light on them. So I do a lot of prediction. I mean, I've been doing prediction for years. I kind of feel with prediction that there's these kind of what schools of karma, that we're kind of tossed into a school. Maybe it's, you know, and that the outcome is up to you and your free will on some level. I mean, there's some people on a spiritual path have a lot more free will to kind of create their future. I think, you know, I was, when I've done really difficult, I was doing this chart, and I could have easily predicted a divorce for the person. It was a very spiritual couple, and it was really clear that there was a potential for a divorce in the chart, but it was also, you know, it was kind of clear that they had worked it out because they were on a spiritual path and they got through it. So, you know, I almost never like to kind of say, well, you're going to get divorced, you know, in spiritual people's charts, because I always feel like there's a chance for people to kind of push, you know, have enough light shown on their situation so they can kind of get to the other end of the school of karma. So, but anyway, I will try to answer your question. So, I think part of it's going to come in our class on dashas and nakshatras. So to do nakshatras the most justice, you want to look at the dispositor of the dasha lord. Okay, so, and that's the most concrete prediction that you can do. So so Rahu is in you're in a Rahu period until 2023. You're currently in Rahu Venus going into Rahu's sun. So Rahu is an Ashlesha Nakshatra, and it's in the first house. So it's you know, and so now we have to see where Mercury is in the chart, because Mercury is the dispositor. Mercury is in a pretty complicated place here. You've got a stellium here. We've actually never looked at your chart in class. I'm sorry it's taken us so long to get to your chart. Whenever you have a stellium in a person's chart, the sign that the stellium is, a stellium is 4 or more planets in a chart. Whenever you have a stellium in a chart, it takes over the chart, and in this case, this chart should almost be read as Capricorn rising, because he's got 6 planets in Capricorn. Saturn, the Lord of Capricorn, is in there too. I mean, this chart really should be read as Capricorn rising, even though you're a Cancer rising. So this is a complicated chart to kind of work with in that respect. But the Rahu Ketu axis is on your first seven. I mean, so obviously there's this, you know, your life lesson obviously is about relationships, whether we read it from a Ketu, we read it from Capricorn rising or Cancer rising. Because you're in a Rahu period, the chart's going to rotate around Rahu a little bit too. So we you know, and it's still basically we're in a major relationship axis during your whole Rahu period, which is very, very complicated. And so in terms of prediction, so we're looking at the Lord of the Nakshatra, which is Ashlesha, and Mercury is in Shravana, connected to the moon, and the moon's in Bharani, connected to in the 10th house, connected to Venus, and then Venus goes into the 8th house. So you can what you can do for prediction, and again, I don't know you well enough I haven't studied your chart for 2 hours to even begin to predict some aspect of your life, but what you could do for prediction with the daisy wheel is to see where the dasha lord is placed, where the lord of the dasha lord is placed, and where the lord of that dasha lord is placed, and that starts giving you a little bit more clues. And kind of, we haven't heard from you the whole class. Do you want to share a little bit about your chart with us, and did you do anything on the daisy wheel at all for homework, or are you just trying to understand it still?
Yeah, I did the daisy chain stuff, but I didn't understand, so that's why I asked the question how you use in prediction.
Okay, and I try to use it more in terms of personality than prediction. You can use it for prediction, which is what I kind of tried to answer now. But in terms of personality, I would start with your moon, and your moon's in Bharani, and
I think my moon is in Ashwini, right?
oh, yeah, I'm sorry, your moon's in Ashwini. Yes, right on the cusp here. Thank you for catching that. So your moon's in Ashwini, so that connects it to K2 in the 7th. And K2 is in Dhanishta, connected to Mars and Shravana, and Mars is in Shravana, connected to the moon in here. So we do have a daisy chain that ends here. So basically, you have a loop between your moon and K2, and then K2 is connected to Mars, and Mars is connected back to the moon. So, and this is all connected to the 7th house and to so basically, it seems to me, is there a lot of emotional repressed anger in relationships that is, just kind of making your life very difficult? That's how I would interpret it on a mental level. Is that true or not?
Not really.
Not really. Okay. Is it unconscious? I mean, I'm glad that I'm totally wrong. Again, this is a very complicated chart. Because we really should read it from the stellium point of view. What happens with the stellium also is that all the planets in your 7th house kind of bleed into your 9th house. So whenever you have a stellium, the energies move over a couple houses. So to me, it creates a lot of complicated, maybe religious energies around spirituality and religion. I don't know if that's the case, but again, I don't know you at all. So why don't you share with the class if you'd like?
Yeah, so when Rahu Dasha started, I entered into the spiritual. I learned like Reiki. Then after that, recently I learned transcendental meditation, all that stuff. But I'm interested to know how, like in Rahu Dasha, it started all spiritual stuff. I used to be religious then, but not so spiritual. But Rahu started spiritual stuff. So.
Okay, so you've got the same thing that I do. You have Rahu and you have Rahu and Mercury's Nakshatra. You don't have the same thing I do. You have Rahu and Mercury's Nakshatra, and Mercury is within 7 degrees of K2. It's probably the closest planet to K2 of all the planets. Don't forget, Mercury always absorbs the planet that's kind of closest to it. So Mercury becomes most like Saturn and most like K2. And so I'm thinking that your Rahu period gets connected to K2 through the closeness to Mercury.
There is a lot of planets in one house. Who dominates? Will win the other, right? But they're all are in one house. So all the planets in one house will influence the dasha or subdasha.
Right. This is a very complicated question. I can send you an article on stelliums. I'll make a note. I think I have your email. I have 2 articles on stelliums. It's very advanced astrology, and I can't do it justice in 5 minutes. But basically with stelliums, you almost have to run the chart from Capricorn. And it's kind of, this is really kind of like a Capricorn chart. And then you have to kind of move the chart, you actually move, I actually was wrong, actually. You have to move the energy spills over 2 houses away from it. So all this energy spills over into your 5th house. So that's, the 5th house is also a very spiritual house. So that's kind of what's happening here. But I'm glad that, so your relationship energy is, you're saying it's not really complicated?
No, not really. There's no
Okay.
conflict.
Okay, and are you just kind of a devoted husband, but deep, and that's, I mean, does it just work really well? I mean, I'm just kind of curious.
No, relationship is fine. I'm married for last 25 years. I have 2 kids, grown-up kids. So relationship is fine. There's no issue.
Okay. So, okay, then this is where we go to the Navamsha chart, which is why you never want to get caught on the Rashi chart. You got Moon in Cancer in the Navamsha chart. So if you took my relationship class, the most important thing is what's the ruler of the 1st house doing in the relationship chart. You've got Moon in the 1st house in Cancer. So here's a case where you might say, oh my God, this is a really difficult relationship chart. This person is going to have all kinds of upheavals in his marriage. You go to the Navamsha chart, and you've got Moon in Cancer in the 1st house. So so yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so thank you. I missed that. And whenever
Okay, that's okay.
and do you have complicated business relationships or business partner relationships?
No, I don't have any complication with relationship or business stuff.
Okay, so
but I really try to understand, like, a lot of planets, one house, how it basically influence the person in
right.
his life, because all planets will influence every day, I think, because most of them are in one place.
Yeah, I think we could teach a whole course on stelliums. Yeah, the basic rule is that the house kind of takes over the chart, and you kind of, especially if the sun's there, and so here's a case where, this chart is very Capricorn. So I assume you have like this incredibly strong work ethic, and you're just very successful in business, and very kind of there's just a lot of Capricorn energy, dominating your life. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one way that you read the chart. Now, in terms of like predicting with the stellium, it gets very complicated. But I'll send you the article, and then we'll do it. We'll go on with that.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. So anybody else do their daisy wheel? Affy? Yeah, I think we talked about your daisy wheel last week, didn't we, Affy?
Yes, hi, we did. And what I noticed, I did it again. So I noticed that my moon, sun, ascendant, dasha, all wheels all end in Mercury.
Right, and so, and I gave you a little insight last week on what that might mean, because it's in the gun, and it's also in the Gandanta. So,
correct. It's also, and it's debilitated in the Navamsha.
right. So, it's in the it's in the 4th house. Yeah. I thought this kind of, I was kind of thinking, and again, I have to spend a lot of time really thinking about this, but my intuitive mind came up with something last week, which was, basically, your kind of core emotional upheaval around relationship, is kind of driving, your core existence to discover who I am. And if you can kind of solve your relationship dilemma, then you have a chance to get enlightened. You've got K2 in the 12th, and I don't know if you have a chart for getting enlightened. It's something I'll teach in my spiritual astrology class, but there's about 8 things you need to look at. But with K2 in the 12th and Scorpio in its own sign, there's a lot of moksha dignity there in general. Scorpio is the moksha sign, K2 is the moksha planet, K2 is very strong in the chart. And the 12th house is also about moksha. And so when everything, if your days and wheels are ending in the 12th house, it means if you can really uncover the deep unconscious patterns around Mercury in the 12th house, in the Gandanta, then you could be liberated. And I think if you listen to my 12th house lecture, I have 2 copies of it on my YouTube channel. I think I talk about Mercury in the 12th house a little bit, and we'll do it again in the blind spot class. My brain is not registering exactly. I think what I told you last week is when Mercury's in the 12th house is that we can get too involved in mental machinations and asking the question why so much, especially with Mercury and Pisces, that it blocks us from moksha. So you just kind of, Sag rising, you just kind of, Moon is, you just have to kind of favor your teaching mode, your counseling mode, your Sag mode of just being in Dharma, and not getting caught up in Mercury's drama, because Mercury is a functional malefic, in a Boudica planet, and it's afflicted. So you have to kind of let go of your mental machinations instead of I think I told you this story once, which is if Mercury, when the intellect is very young, it has a sense of wonder. It's like the 4-year-old goes to the magic show and sees the rabbit come out of the hat, and he says, the little boy at 4-year-old says, "Wow," he just has wonder. At about 7 or 8 years old, when the intellect's developing, he goes, "Daddy, how did you do that? Is there a trap door? I want to know how he did that." Okay, so the Mercury can be a little bit of a trap for Sag rising in that respect. If it gets too inquisitive, why, what it needs to do is move into wonder. Wonder is like God, when we have relationship problems, we say, instead of saying, "Why is he like that? I can't believe he did that." We talk about it for 6 weeks. Instead of doing that, we go, "Wow, some people are like that." We go back to the 4-year-old. It's just in awe that our relationships are like that. You see?
Yes.
So that's the key for you. It's finding the wonder and not letting the mind engage. Why did he do that? No, God, some people are like that. My God, isn't God so wonderful creating all these crazy people? It's wonder, right?
Yes. Yes. I'm working on the wonder part as opposed to the why.
Okay.
The questioning. So yeah, that was very on point.
Okay, so good. So we got to the secret of your 12th house. Find the wonder. We did it. So that was the end of the daisy wheel. Okay, thank you for doing that work. Mohini had a question. Oh, I'm having trouble. Okay. Jamie, can you get her unmuted?
I'm trying.
Okay, there she is.
Thank you.
I think you could.
Namaste, Barry. Thank you so much for such a beautiful class. I did my daisy wheel, and then I've realized that everything is linked up to the moon.
Okay, wow.
Right. So now I just wanted to, I hope that this question is not outside the realm of this presentation, but you were talking a little bit about the Nakshatras, and then, the qualities of each star.
Right.
And then you talked a little bit about the Shula, right?
About the what?
the Shula Das and using that Shula. Do you remember that? That's also in the
Yeah, I don't remember
slides.
talking about Shula Dasha because
No,
it's
no, you didn't talk about the Shula Das, but you gave us a little bit of a hint around it.
okay.
In the slides, I think it's in the slides as we get later into the slides.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, what I guess I was asking is that in the daisy chain, actually everything links back up to the sun dasa. So I was just wondering, when you're using this, for example, in prediction, perhaps, would you use Vinshutari Das as the way to look at that Navangsa, the Navatara concept?
Yeah, I don't want to.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there are 32 dasha. There's all these advanced dashas, but
Yeah.
Vimshotri dasha is connected to the Nakshatras, and in 2 weeks we'll have a class on Nakshatras and dashas, and we will
Okay.
talk about Vimshotri specifically. But what we could do, we could go a little bit further, and obviously the moon's in Jupiter's Nakshatra, so Jupiter's kind of the final depositor. But let's look at your Sarvabhata chakra. Where did it go? So what I want to get into this a little bit because I want to
Oh, cool. Great.
maybe not the second, but I'll use your chart because I want to see what star your moon is in, that where does it end up? Let's see. And I'm somehow let me get rid of this part of it because it's confusing. Okay. So I'm confusing. I can barely understand this. So your moon is your Jamna Nakshatra, and it's connected to Jupiter. Now let's see. This is looking at the aspects, which I have to play with this some more. There's a connection between Moon and Rahu because Moon is because of the aspect here.
Interesting.
And Rahu is an 8, which this is why we're gonna have to spend 5 weeks on this next.
Yeah, so interesting. See, I couldn't get my head around this at all. Yeah, it's interesting though. Okay.
Yeah. So the moon. Let me go back to your natal chart here because I don't want to lose the class either because.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it now. Then that's fine. I'll just wait till the right time.
Yeah,
that's okay.
Let's do a little bit more because but yeah, there's all kinds of fun stuff you can do with this, but it's going to take some time to get there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, though. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on. So I guess we've practiced these basic techniques a little bit using the daisy wheel a little bit, but I just want you to get in the habit. Maybe I'll just a few more people in the class. I want you to get in the habit of looking at all your planets and seeing what nakshatras they're in and how it connects it to another house that you might not see, and that's just through kind of the basic dispositor technique. And this is basic nakshatra technique, and I didn't emphasize it enough. Let me do some people that we haven't done their charts ever because they've been really bad. And people who ask questions at the beginning. Anyway, Sonara, who's here today, I think we should do Sonara today. Are you still on, Sonara?
I don't see her, Barry.
Okay, she left. Okay, who else is here that I've never done? Because I've been really bad about giving attention to the people who ask questions, and then everybody else gets left behind. So we did make contact. We've done everybody in class today that's here, which is great. Claudia, we haven't done. Claudia, do you want to be? Do you want to volunteer? It's useful if people are on the line because they can verify what I'm seeing. Okay, we haven't looked at Claudia's chart. Claudia, do we have the correct chart?
She's unmuted, so I don't
Can you
know.
get your mic to work? Do you want to be, and there's one person in the class that didn't want us to use their chart, but I think Claudia was okay, but I can't remember.
Oh, coffee. She's at a coffee shop. She can't talk.
You can't talk. Okay, so we can still talk. We can still talk a little bit about her chart, but we can't get it. She'll have to verify by texting. Okay, so I'm going to let you, Jamie, verify what her experience is when she texts. Okay, so we got an agreement about texting. Okay, so let's look at Claudia's moon. Claudia's moon is in the 8th house in Venus's Nakshatra. So, and she's a Taurus rising. She's in a Rahu period. She's running Rahu Venus. Okay, so that's appropriate. Rahu's in the 7th. So usually when and Rahu's in Saturn's Nakshatra of Anurata. And again, last week I think we learned that Anurata is, we'd rather have Rahu in Anurata than in the other two nakshatras, although it's technically debilitated here, but it's still a little bit better off here. So Rahu in the 7th, usually when we have Ketu in the 1st and Rahu in the 7th, it usually creates a personality where somebody is very devoted in their relationships and they crave another relationship, and they and this becomes kind of the solution to this challenge. Usually there has to be, they have to be devoted in their relationship and just kind of attract charismatic men, otherwise and just be willing to be the fan to a rock star, otherwise they usually kind of suffer a lot. The moon is in Venus's Nakshatra. Okay, that's the Rahu period, so it's a relationship period. And then if we were to verify that, we have Rahu in the 7th house in the relationship chart also. So this is a very kind of karmic relationship period at the moment. So the moon in the 8th is one of the more difficult positions, and I don't know, Claudia, if you've gotten through it. In the Navamsha chart, by the time you're old enough that you should have worked through your moon in the 8th issues, but you still have Rahu with the moon in the 7th here, so it's a little bit better here in the Navamsha chart. It's the moon in the 8th usually creates repressed emotions or just really deep unconscious emotional grunge that we're always trying to work through. The depositor of the moon is in Pisces in the 11th house. So that really is helping this moon, because the dispositor is very strong in this chart. And so that's uplifting it. Now, if we go to the daisy wheel in the nakshatras here, moon in Venus is nakshatra, and Venus is exalted in the 11th house. So this moon, suddenly, if we were just looking at this chart superficially, we would say, the moon in the 8th, this is a problem. Maybe as a young child, the emotions were stuck, but the moon Venus connection is very powerful for a rich emotional world. So this chart, this moon is complicated. Obviously, it's hemmed in between Rahu and Mars. So we had another student in the class that just had that. I think Kathy Coleman had that also. And but in this case, Mars is in the 8th. Sorry, Mars is in the 9th. Again, this is the first time I'm looking at your chart, Claudia, so I'm a little my first read here. the Lord of the 7th and the 9th would create a spiritual partner, but it's the GK in Gemini astrology, so there's a lot of challenges with it. Mercury, the Lord of the 2nd and the 5th, also creates a spiritual partner here, so that's positive. I was trying to link the Moon to Venus, and Venus is in Saturn's Nakshatra, and Saturn is in the 2nd house, and Saturn's the Yogacaraka planet for Tauruses. So my mind is going in wheels here. Claudia, do you want to shed any light on your emotional experience around relationship? To me, there's a lot of rich emotions here inside because Moon is connected to Venus and Jupiter, but maybe stuck as in your childhood. And then Venus is the chart lord, and it's also connected to Mother, to the MK. In general, because Venus is exalted in the 11th, it's a very wonderful placement. But when you look at it originally, you kind of think you see there's a lot of complexity there. Claudia, you want to share anything?
Yeah, she said she had a intensely traumatic relationship and a breakup in 2011. So she's sworn off, and it's been pretty horrible. And then she said when I was younger, I had affairs with older married men. Since my last breakup, I've had no interest in dating or another relationship at all. Spirituality and health are my focus.
Okay. So basically, we could see how this would, be the case. But obviously, the essence of this chart is learning relationship, and so and obviously we have to heal after relationship. And Rahu being in Saturn's Nakshatra, Saturn is always a little bit harsh on the emotional level. Saturn is in Ardra, which is always about deep suffering, and the deep suffering is supposed to bring transformation and growth. Ardra is the teardrop nakshatra. It brings the tears of Rudra to kind of heal. So I think this whole Rahu period, is connected to Ardra here, and because there's this loop between Saturn and Ardra. So and also maybe a lot of sadness and suffering around family issues. But the way out of this dilemma would be obviously would be involved in Shiva, in connecting to Rudra, which is to Shiva, and you could probably do Shiva Rudram on Mondays. But I could, sometime if you want a personal remedy, we could do something with that. But there's this whole connection between the Dasha Lord and Saturn being an Ardra, going back to Rahu. So there's this connection between family and relationship, having this kind of spiral in the daisy wheel. Okay, everybody understand that? So I kind of need the stuff that we're doing today is actually kind of advanced, and I want to see if you're following it better now that we spent some more time on it.
Hey, Barry, just real quick, Audra had a question about the chain, and she was wondering if you can follow it based on the number of the nakshatra. So, for example, like the Janma or the Sampat or the Vimpada.
Right. That would be the next step, right? If you really want to get into understanding the intricacies of it, you do want to connect it to the. I mean, if we want to predict with nakshatras, we have to go to the special nakshatras and the numbers, and that's kind of crucial. And I was hoping to do some more examples with that, but again, I kind of think we need 5 weeks to really do it justice. But the answer is yes. What if the daisy wheel connects to a difficult nakshatra like a 7 or a 16? Those are two of the more difficult ones. Then then it's going to bring out some hidden suffering that maybe you're not seeing right away. But if it's connected to a 2 or a 9, it's going to bring out some hidden benefit that you're going to be able to predict. So you might see something difficult, but then the nakshatra is connected to a 2 or a 9, so it uplifts the prediction. You understand? I'll have to give you some examples. I have it in the slides I sent, but this anyway. I'm trying to kind of service our basic understanding of nakshatras, and there are people in the class that are very advanced. So I'm trying to toe this line, be giving people who are more advanced some information at the same time, like not losing everybody else. And I don't know how I'm doing, so you'll have to let me know.
Hey, Barry?
Yeah.
Can I just ask on that, if we were to experiment with following that chain, would you start from the moon, the Lagna, Dasha Lord, or could you do it by planet as well? I mean, would you go?
You could theoretically do it with anything, but
Okay.
but you should start with the moon and the Lagna and the Lagna Lord and the Dasha Lord.
Okay.
Because those are going to be the most relevant. And the Dasha Lord may be the most relevant because it's going to tell you what's happening now. I didn't know this stuff 7 years ago when I entered my Rahu period. And lo and behold, my Rahu period was ruled by Ketu, and Ketu is ruled by Mula and Nritti. And, I didn't really understand what was going on with it because I didn't know some of these subtle laws. But when you know the subtle laws, then you start saying, okay, my Rahu period is about Ketu, and my Ketu period is about Nritti, and I better keep getting deeper with my spiritual practice, if I'm going to get enlightened,
Got it. And then you'd look at what, like the Navamsha, I'm assuming? You go to...
So you go to the moon, start with the Dasha Lord, go to the moon, go to the Ascendant Lord, because, that governs, how your intelligence is functioning, how your body is being affected. You can also look at the sun, because the sun governs how you appear in the world, your career.
Okay. Cool.
So we've got 15 minutes. Let's see where we can go. Let's see. You can reread the slides. I have to get to this presentation per charts, otherwise we're going to be really in trouble. Because we have to get to the padas. So, and this is kind of an introduction to next week. So I said it earlier in the lecture that the padas are going to give us the more microscopic information. And early in the class, I gave you my videotape on Navamsha. And so we learned about Virgotama, exalted, we learned about all the qualities of the padas, Pushkara, and all that stuff. So if you didn't watch that tape, you can review it because that gives you more information about the padas. And then I have a bunch of examples here. I wanted to give this talk on the seven, on the Purushartas, because I think it really bleeds into what we're going to have to do with the padas. So you can read the rest of the slides, and one thing that happens now, as you can see, I always prepare too much material, and so you have the slides, you have the articles, you can always study on your own. And what we did today was good because we used a lot of examples of people in the class. But I'm going to go back to a little bit of lecture now. Does anybody else need something though before I go here?
Audra had a question, Barry. She wondered where we can find a full list of the numbers, like 1 through 27, and the description for each number.
In terms of the special nakshatra qualities?
I think so. Let me unmute. Go ahead, Audra.
Yes, Barry, the 1 through 27, like the first 9 you gave us, and like I've got 16, 23, but there's a whole bunch of those numbers that I don't have a definition for. Is there some place that we can get all the...
Yeah, I tried to keep it simple. So if you review my Sarvabhata Chakra stuff, I put in all the special ones with detailed descriptions, the ones that you're really going to focus on. Basically, you have the principle with it is that 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 are generally a good influence, and when they happen, on the second level and the third level, which is 2 plus 9 is 11, 4 plus 9 is 13. So, I mean, you can just, they're less potent, okay? So, so basically you can look at, just to review that, because we're not going to get to it. So usually one is questionable, depending on, one can be really, really wonderful sign, or it could be, it could have a deep karmic health issue. 3, 5, and 7 are almost always difficult on the primary level of the Navatora. Okay, then 2, 4, 6, 8, and 9 are the most potent on the primary level. Okay, you're understanding that. So the ones I gave you are the ones that are traditionally studied. 10 for career, 12, 16 is always a challenging one. And last week in the slideshow, I gave you an article and a detailed explanation of the ones that are most studied. The other ones are kind of like extrapolation. So basically, 2, 11, and 20 are all 2s, right? And 2 is the most potent one. 11 is not as potent as 2, and 20 is not as potent as 2 also, but they're all 2s. So do you understand?
So does that mean that 2, 11, and 20 all means gains and wealth, or does
Yes.
11 and 20 mean something different?
No, 2, 11, and 20 means gains and wealth. Yeah.
Okay, so on the knowledge that you're giving me there, basically to add the numbers. So like for 12, I've got the place a person's fated to go. 16 is connection to marriage. 18 is past life karma stuff. So on these other ones that I don't have information, 13, 14, 15, 20, 21, 23, 24, 28, 27, are all those ones that are empty, I just add it and it's the exact same as one of them through 1 through 9?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for asking that
Okay.
question. Yeah, I've been
Okay.
meaning to go over this more, but I just
Okay.
I was hoping the written, this is why we have a live class and you have a live teacher. I was hoping
Right.
that the slides in the article were clear enough, but they obviously aren't. So I have
And
wanted
that's something too. In the chain, Barry, when we're trying to follow a chain and hypothetically, let's say that we're in a Mercury Nakshatra. So then Mercury is going to take you to the 3rd and 6th house, and the 3rd and 6th house is empty. Does that mean our loop ended, or do we go to another Nakshatra ruled by Mercury?
That's a really good question. The loop always takes you to another planet, and the planet is always in some house. The loop shouldn't take you to a house. The loop should take you to a planet.
So you
So
should never end up in an empty house.
you should never end up in an empty house. No, because if you're
Okay.
not doing, yeah, you always go to another planet.
Okay, see, I messed up. Thank you. Good to know. Perfect. I love that rule.
Okay. Okay. So, and I realize that, this is like a first exposure to this stuff. And if I don't, thank you, Audra, for your questions, because I don't, there may be like 10 other people that have the same questions and don't know what I'm talking about. I'm wondering if I should quickly go to some of that material to review it. Let me see if I.
Hey Barry, while you do that, Mohini has a question, so I'm going to unmute her.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mohini.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mohini.
You hear me?
I can hear you.
Sorry, really quickly, I just wanted to ask you, did you say that you had a video presentation on some of this topic that you sent out?
I sent you a video presentation on the Navamsha class, which I know you watched. That was,
Okay.
yeah, that was talking about padas, because there's
Oh,
there's 3 or 4 things that we have to learn about padas. The basic one, is it Virgodama? Is it Pushkara? Is it friends,
no,
enemies?
I didn't watch that. I didn't watch that. I haven't seen that. Interesting. No.
Okay, I did put it in the Dropbox. I sent you an email
Oh,
to.
Dropbox. Okay, maybe I need to check there. Okay.
Okay, it was in week 2 I sent that.
Fair enough. Thank you so much.
Okay, good.
I'll check. Okay,
I'm
thank
here to
you.
answer questions. Okay, so now this is getting to be a little bit bizarre because my other slideshow is missing now. I sent it to you, so you have it. Where did it go?
With these numbers, do they have, I'm assuming they have ties to just like even just basic numerology, right?
Yeah, you can actually connect them to numerology too. And there's a whole, I mean, I am not into numerology, but there's a whole, we could have a whole lesson on these numbers and their connection to numerology. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to quickly go review this stuff because it just came up. So I sent you the article last week. I hate reading stuff that I've sent you, but let me try to get to stuff that is new that we can illustrate with the example here. So I gave you the whole series of questions on how to do Sarvabhaudra Chakra. I basically wanted you to just really understand that this is just a powerful visual tool for you to see everything that we've learned, because you can see the Navatara, you can see the special Nakshatras, you can see the aspects and how hidden things are aspecting each other. So basically, we need 5 weeks to really do this, but I wanted you to start exploring it as a kind of a play thing on your own, because it takes a lot of time to kind of like just kind of get to. But I think I think it's so exciting. Let's look at Jamie's chart, since she's the moderator, and use her as an example.
Hey Barry, what was that slide number that you were talking about?
Which one?
I think the one that you were just on. I can't see it, so.
Yeah, okay.
So it's lesson 8A, okay. And, oh, slide number 19? Or,
Yeah.
or was that, I think it was previous to that, but at least,
Yeah, I can, hold on.
sorry.
No problem. I sent you the Sarvabhaudra Chakra
Okay.
cookbook, but that slide sorter, I'm just, is it 11? No, it's not 11. It's
Oh, I think it was 18, maybe?
yeah, it's
So 18 and 19? Okay.
yeah, 18 and 19. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so here's Jamie's chart, and I just want to kind of review this. Did you, Anita, did you understand the basics of this, or was it just way over your head? Because I just, it's very advanced work, but I really want you to see that it's so useful for looking at your chart. So, so here's her moon, and her moon's in Swati, and so if we count from her moon, so her Jamna Nakshatra, now we can also change this to English. So okay, her birth star is the moon. Her wealth star is Vishaka, which is ruled by Jupiter. We now have Jupiter in Vishaka now, in transit now. So we'll put up the transits in a minute. Her third star, which is a challenge, is Anuradha. Her fourth star is Jeshta, which from the moon, which is being translated as community. Community is also kind of a form of, it's also a happiness, wealth kind of thing. The fifth nakshatra, which is Mula, is challenging. So Saturn transiting back into Mula is going to bring up 5 issues. Saturn is now in Purvashada, which is a 6, which is usually a gain nakshatra. Her natal Mercury is here. Uttarashada, which is ruled by the sun, is a 7, and 7s are always, one of the more tricky nakshatras to deal with. So we're going to have a lot of planets going into Uttarashada soon. We've got Ketu that's going to go into there, and we're going to have probably only Ketu will go in there in September, and then Abhishek is again, it's an auspicious star. We actually talked about that last week. Shravana is an 8, Anisha is a 9. And then the second level, career, which is it's called the Karma star, is 1. Karma meaning career. And then the 2s repeat again, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so 16, which is a difficult one, is is Kritika. So Kritika transits are going to be kind of difficult. So now let's just go over how to use this real quickly. Again, we really need to spend a lot more time on this. So the second level will show you the current transit. So when you're looking at when you're trying to see what's going on, so you've got your Navatara from the moon, which why am I losing it here? Okay, this is so the outer ring is the current transit, so don't pay attention to the numbers. The inner ring we just went through. Okay, so then you can just quickly, when you're doing somebody's chart, you can just quickly see Saturn in Purva Bodhisattva is obviously it's impacting her natal Mercury, which you could see anyway, but it's also having an impact with an aspect across the way to her natal Gulika, which we haven't studied. Gulika has a way to kind of create paranoia and anxiety. And so when you have Saturn aspecting Gulika, when it's really close, if it's a close aspect, we'd have to look at her, what degree is your Gulika at? Do you know, Jamie?
I'd have to look that up. I thought it was in the 7s, but let me look.
Yeah. Okay, so it's
So the danger points there, does that mean that's when I need to become a hermit and hibernate at home?
Yeah. Well, the thing sometimes, again, that I'm trying to teach, like whenever you have a Saturn Gulika influence, it's going to increase anxiety in your life. Now, it's going to be most intense when it's exact. And I was just trying to figure out when it's most exact, because Saturn's about 13 degrees, and Gulika is saying it's in pada 1. I'm sorry, this is, Ardra is Nakshatra 6 pada 1. So this is going to be at 6 degrees.
Yeah, my Gulika is 7 degrees, 8.
7 degrees. So it's really only a problem when you know, it retrogrades close enough to. But I think when it goes into Mula, see, it's not aspecting Gulika. It's not aspecting Gulika. It's not a problem at all. Okay.
Okay.
But so I just wanted to show you that. So first thing you can do. Okay, the first thing you do with this whole thing is, if you look at my cookbook that I sent you, is one, what dasha are you in? So Jamie's in a Saturn period, right?
Yeah, I think it's Saturn, Mars, Saturn right now.
Okay, so, right. So Saturn. So that's why we looked at Saturn first. So looked at the dasha lord. The dasha lord is going through a 6. So that it's a good transit. It's going through a 6, even though it's an 8th house transit for her. It's uplifted because it's going through the 6th Navatara. When it retrogrades back into the 5th Navatara, it's just a more problematic Saturn transit because it's an 8th house transit. It's going through the 5th Navatara. Okay, and if there were any aspects here, we don't have anything. We do have an aspect here because it's aspecting your. I'm sorry. I don't want to lose you all because I was trying to do an example here to show you how to do it. So look at the dasha lord, look at what stars it's going through, and that gives you some information. Look at Saturn, look at Rahu, look at the dasha lord. The stars that they go through and the planets that they're influencing are going to give you a lot more information for predicting. That's what I was trying to show you. This is just a good visual. When you do this by hand, you can't see it. When you do it with the Sarvabhata Chakra SBC, which you can just see everything, and it's just you can see the numbers, you can see what the numbers mean, you can see what the transits are doing, you can do the aspects. It's just like mind-boggling. Suddenly you have like loads more information than you ever had. So this is why we need to learn this stuff, but you have to kind of like get Sri Jyoti Star or learn to use it on Jagannatha Hora so you can play with it. But it takes a lot of time to kind of like get it down. You have to know your Navatara. You have to understand and I added a wrinkle in my flow chart. For those of you who know Ashtaka Varga, whenever you do transits, if the Ashtaka Varga is high for like a benefic, it's gonna have a positive effect and negate any problem that you might see. So and I don't know what your Ashtaka Varga is for Saturn is in. We can look it up. Hold on.
So during a more malefic period or point, then that's when you would do more remedies?
Right. You might want to do more remedies, or you just want to have awareness what's going on or what you should do. So let's look at Ashtaka Varga real quickly. So what I'm looking at is Saturn. I'm looking at Ashtaka Varga for Saturn in Sagittarius. Okay. For those of you who studied this before, I can't explain it now. I can send you an article. So for Saturn, you want 3 or more or Bindu points in a sign for it to have a more positive effect. So she's got 4. Okay. In this case, it's weird. It is a malefic, so it could be more power to do harm, but it's a functional malefic because Saturn is good friends with Taurus. So we're gonna call it an anxiety period that will bring good results, because subjectively it may produce more anxiety, but it may bring good results because there's 4 Bindu points. So what I'm doing here, I'm sure I lost all of you, not all of you, but what I'm doing here is I'm doing an example of the worksheet that I gave you for Sarvabhata Chakra. So what you want to do is look at the Dasha Lord, see what star it's going through, see how many Bindu points it has, look at the Ascendant Lord, see, like Mars is going to be in Shravana for a really long time, okay? And now Jamie's Shravana is an 8, so it's a good star, and it's a ninth house transit of Mars could create tensions with gurus or fathers or something like that. But it's an 8, and so then we would go to the Bindu points. For Mars, and then we see Mars in okay, Mars has 1 Bindu point in Capricorn in the 9th. But remember, if you remember the study, we want malefics to be less powerful. So I think that helps, Jamie.
Okay.
Okay. So even though normally somebody might say, I don't think it helps. Basically, you want malefics to have. Now, there's one more thing we have to look at I'm looking at the individual Bindu points. You want to actually look at the totals for the sign. Could you do a survey on how many people have studied Ashtaka Varga before? Because I'm really going out into a tangent if they haven't. How many people have studied Ashtaka Varga? Have people kind of do a survey, because otherwise I don't want to confuse people.
I've got 2 coming up. Okay, 3, I think, or 1. Venkata has, looks like.
All right.
The rest of us, I don't really think we have studied it.
Okay, so you've got 20 rekas. I studied it in one of my classes that I taught, but I can't throw in a lesson in this class because it's too much. But it's really valuable. You've got 20 rekas in Capricorn here, which means again you want a low number for malefics. So basically, the bottom line is this Mars. Okay, this is what I was trying to give you an example of. This Mars. Oh shoot! I think I just. Okay. Okay. So what I was saying is that this Mars transit, Mars is in Uttarashada, is currently having an impact on. Do I have Jamie? Okay.
Yeah.
Jamie. In, out. Jamie's in. Okay. So what I was saying here, so the bottom line, if we're looking at, you're in Saturn Mars. So your Saturn transit is better in Venus's Nakshatra. It's more challenging in Mula. I'm sorry. Wait. Let me get rid of the transit. I'm confused because you have to kind of look at two different charts here. Okay. So Jamie's moon is Swati. So Uttarashada is an 8. Why is this coming out different now? 1, 2. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know why the numbers changed. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. 6s are good. Okay, so Saturn is transiting through a 6 now. What we said before is correct. When it goes into a 5, I don't know why the numbers changed here. It shouldn't have done this. I don't know. I got the ascended up. Ah, okay, we got it. Okay, we got it. Okay, this is what happens. Okay, so Saturn's going through a 6. It's going to retrograde into a 5. That's more problematic. We looked at the Ashtaka Varga. It helps. Okay, Mars. She's in the Saturn Mars period. Mars is in when it goes into Shravana a lot. When it goes retrograde and direct, it's going to be in Shravana for a long period of time. That's an 8. It has low bindu points. It's not going to create that many problems. Okay. So bottom line, somebody calls you and says, "I'm worried about my Saturn Mars period." You're looking at the chart. You start looking at the Navatora, and you see it's not as bad as you're worrying about. Okay. Jamie, this is your chart. Did you follow what I did?
I'm going to have to go back through and a little bit more slowly and just, take it step by step and
Okay.
interpret. But yeah, I mean, I think I can get the gist.
I was really quick, and you don't know Ashtaka Varga, and I will see if I can send the slide on my slide series on Ashtaka Varga to you guys. I mean, you can look it up. Everybody does it. It's one of those like basic Jyotish things that everybody studies, but it's used for transits to see if they're amplified or negated or made worse. And so what you can do with this whole thing is when you combine Navatara with the Ashtaka Varga, you suddenly get really microscopic information. But we're going to have to spend a whole class on this. I'm really sorry I rushed this.
This is really cool, Barry. Getting good feedback too.
What?
I said, this is really great, and we're getting a lot of good feedback too, that, this is amazing. Thanks, Mohini. At least she can see, something of how it works now, and she's thankful, so.
Yeah, if you want to study this on your own, there's only one book on it that I know of, Mystics of Sarvado Bakrachada, and I sent it to you in an email. It's by M.K. Agarwal, and the problem with the book is, these people take these Sanskrit texts, and the texts get very kind of black and white. This is good. This is danger. This is bad. And that's just not good Jyotish. It's you kind of like on a transit, you're going to have relationship problems if you don't deal with your emotional anxiety or something, because anytime you tell somebody danger, they're thinking they're going to fall off a cliff. So you can't use those words, It's never really like that. It's kind of like emotional challenge, or something. Once in a while it is something severe, like you're going to, but for the most part it isn't. Okay, so I've definitely I've gone way past your bedtime. I'm going to take some final questions, and then I'm going to and then we can close. We didn't get to the per charts, as I sent you the slideshow, so you can read about them, and maybe we can go over them quickly, and then we can connect them to the podas next week. I'm not going to do anything more with Sarvadabhadra Chakra because it's kind of a can of worms. It's kind of like I said, it was play work. I want you to start playing with it and read the articles in the books and get the software to look at it, because it's very powerful what you can do with it. And until we had the software, it was just like you couldn't do it. But you can click on any transit and any planet, you can see the influences, and then you can add the transits of, and then you suddenly see all these influences that you're not seeing, and it's just mind-boggling what you can do with it. And you can actually predict you can predict everything with this chart. I mean, we could spend a whole year studying it, and I am not, a master of it. I'm just beginning to kind of get my hands around it to use it. But if you master this, you can really be a master of prediction.
Hey, Barry, can I ask one other question? If it's focused on a planet that's like retrograde or
Right.
exalted, so is that energy, I'm assuming that energy and kind of what you're looking at here is going to be more pronounced?
Right. I put that in the slideshow. So like retrograde benefics are more powerful.
Okay.
I think I told you they were 2 times more powerful. Exalted benefics are 3 times as powerful. Exalted malefics are 3 times as negative, right?
Right. Okay.
So we've got an exalted Mars. Now, if it's not a good planet for you, it's really going to cause problems, depending on what houses it's going through, what other planets it's impacting, that kind of thing. So, yeah, you have to kind of, but what also happens in Sarbado Chakra is when it goes retrograde, it changes the aspect. So this is why you can see right away why aspects have completely different meanings when planets go retrograde, because suddenly when it's direct, it's aspecting one direction. When it's retrograde, it's suddenly aspecting a whole new set of planets.
Oh, okay.
So it's like and the computer's doing that. It's showing you that Saturn's aspecting Ardra here, and it is aspecting your natal Gulika, creating a little bit more anxiety and paranoia. But when it gets out of there, it won't have that impact.
Okay. Wow. Mind blown.
It's astounding what you can do with this stuff. It's like and there's more. I mean, then you've got, there are people that predict, what day of the week you're going to have a problem based on the way Saturn aspects, goes through the days of the weeks in the Tithys here. I mean, it works. It's just like mind-boggling what you can do with it. This is like the really advanced stuff if you can get to master this stuff. So I'm inspiring you to kind of like start looking at it, because it's very hard if you really want to be good. If you want to be top Jyotishis, but there are very few people who kind of who use it. But to me, it suddenly like puts everything that we're studying in a picture, and so that, and we said, and you add my article about the types of aspect. Mars aspects wants to fight, okay? So you put Mars aspects, it's going to create fights. You put a Saturn aspect, it creates suffering and health problems. You get a Jupiter, you get a Mercury aspect, it wants to communicate. You can just look at the qualities of the aspects and what they do. Venus creates aspects of love, So, you start adding all these little pieces of information, and you suddenly get this whole rich tapestry. And then you add the padas, and the pada aspects are very powerful too. So, anyway, this is like. Again, I'm not trying to pretend I'm not trying to blow you away. I'm just trying to say the ocean is very deep, and you can study it for a long time. But I just wanted you to be aware of it. So we're not going to do any more with it next week. You can work on the worksheet. You can play with it on your own, but I can't do any more with it this class, because I just want you to look at it, to try to integrate the Navatara and the transits and the special Nakshatras, and see how they all interact. Okay. So final questions on that?
I don't think, you guys are unmuted, so if anybody.
It's late, and I've probably blown you away now. So happy Mother's Day again. Next week, I think next week I'm sure we're going to end up doing padas, so we'll have to do all the aspects of padas, which is going to be so if you haven't watched the Navamsha tape, you can review it again, because you have to know all those basic PowerPoints in the padas. And then we'll learn some more PowerPoints in the padas, and connect them to the aims of life, and how we can refine our interpretations. And we'll continue on with a couple more Nakshatras also. So again, 2 weeks you get a break. So class next week, no class for Memorial Day, and then we'll keep moving. Hope you're enjoying it. It's quite fascinating. We'll see you next week. Jamie, maybe I'll talk to you for a minute after class if we can make that happen.
Okay.